Welcome back, everyone. In the last video, as I mentioned, we have utilized our new user context in order to store our user wherever it either signs in or signs out. We know that in our sign up form, our sign in form, and our navigation form is currently where the majority of that code is living. But we can start to see that this might be a little difficult to keep track of. In fact, we actually missed another place where we need to store this user inside of our user context whenever a user signs in with Google Popup. Here we know that we're authenticating the user once our sign in with Google Popup succeeds, so we actually need to also set current user here as well. But the larger pattern that's emerging is that we're noticing that we're spreading out all of this different code in multiple places. So what we want to do is we want to be able to now move this code into one centralized place. And luckily for us, Firebase actually gives us an easy way to do that. We can actually start using what's known as an observable listener. And an observable listener is a way for us to hook into some kind of stream of events. Whether these events are sign-in events or sign-out events, we're actually able to trigger something based on these changes. I'm going to dive a little deeper into that technical concept a little later, but for now, let's utilize it because I think it's the best way to actually understand something like that by using it in practice first. So the method that we want to get is onAuthStateChange. This will return us back a listener. And in order for us to use it, again, we're going to create another helper function. And what I'm going to show you is that I want to call this onAuthStateChange listener. I'm going to call it a listener because that's what it is. It's an observer listener. And again, for now, don't worry about what the observer means. I'll talk about it later. But what this observer does is it returns you back whatever you get back from onAuthStateChange. In order for onAuthStateChange to work, it takes two parameters. The first one, as you guessed it, is going to be our auth singleton. The second one, though, is going to be some callback that you want to call every time this auth state changes. So because we're defining it as our own method, I'm going to pass this method directly in like so. So essentially, I'm just saying, whenever you instantiate this function, you have to give me a callback because this callback is what I'm going to give to onAuthStateChange. So let's copy our onAuthStateChange listener. And in fact, we can even be more explicit by saying, if you don't give me a callback, I'm not even going to work. But for now, let's not worry about that. Let's just see what it does. Let's go one step at a time. So I'm going to take this onAuthStateChange listener, and I'm going to go into our user context. The reason why I want to do this in user context is because the majority of the code that has to do with fetching and keeping track of what the user value is should probably be kept in the place where we're also storing it. So here, in order to utilize it, I want to mount it on component mount. So I'm going to use useEffect, and I'm going to use this pattern we've already seen, where I'm going to instantiate some function, but give it an empty dependency array. Meaning that I only want to run this function once when the component mounts. And what I'm going to run is going to be this new method that we got from our Firebase utils. So let's talk a little bit about this onAuthStateChange listener. onAuthStateChange listener, as we know, receives some kind of callback function. What it does is it passes this callback function as the second value of onAuthStateChange. What onAuthStateChange does, as I mentioned, is that it will call this callback whenever the authentication state of our auth singleton changes. So when a user signs in, that's considered an auth change, because the user has authenticated. When a user signs out, that's another change. So both times our callback is going to get invoked whenever a user authenticates in and whenever an authenticates out, so sign out. This though is an open listener. This means that the moment you set it, this thing is always waiting to see whether or not auth states are changing. And the moment it does, it will run a callback. So this thing is a permanently open listener. You can imagine this as if somebody is standing there and trying to listen for changes to this auth state. And then whenever it does, it will run this function. The problem with this is that you actually need to get rid of it, i.e. tell it to stop listening whenever this component unmounts. Because if you don't, then this is something of a memory leak. Because if this component unmounts, we don't need this listener anymore. So this method actually gives us a handy way to do so. It returns us back a function that will unsubscribe, i.e. stop listening. So the reason why we get it back from our function is because, as you can imagine, we are really just returning back from our function whatever we get back from onAuthStateChange. And this is really the function that gives us back that unsubscribe function. So here we just say, hey, give me the unsubscribe. And as we know with useEffect, with this callback, it will run whatever you return from this callback when it unmounts. So we want to say, hey, unsubscribe whenever you unmount. And here what I'm saying is that, okay, what I want to do is for now, I just want to see what am I even getting back. So I'm just going to console log user. So what's going to happen is when our application initializes, we're going to mount our user provider. Our user provider is going to instantiate this first callback on mount. And what it's going to do is it's going to call onStateChange listener. It's going to give it this callback, and this callback is just saying, hey, whenever the auth state changes, I want you to log the user for me. But going back to our application, you might actually notice something interesting. Right now, our application state seems to say that we're signed out. But let's refresh. When I refresh, what do I see right here in that user context? Our callback is actually telling us, hey, you do have a user actually. And the reason why this is happening is because the authentication singleton that we have from our Firebase utils, the one that we've been using all this time that we instantiated from this getAuth. This object, it turns out, is actually keeping track of whether or not the user has signed in or signed out using the different sign in and sign out methods that we have been calling. And it actually persists this between refreshes. So that's why inside of our application, despite the fact that I refreshed, I didn't actually sign in or sign up. And yet somehow Firebase knows that my user is still authenticated in. This is because Firebase is actually listening to our current connection to this instance of Crown Clothing, where earlier I must have signed in somehow. The only way that we can actually change this is if I manually sign out. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to also import this sign out call, and I'm just going to call it because right now I'm currently signed into my user. So what I want to do is just the moment that this user provider mounts, I just want you to sign out. I'm just saying sign out no matter what. So here what happens, you'll notice that we sign out first, but you see these null calls. This null call is actually, again, our callback getting fired because an auth state change has happened. And in our particular case, what we did was we signed out our user. So here, now if I get rid of this sign out user, technically our auth singleton is not keeping track of a signed in user now. And this makes sense because we just signed them out. So if I refresh, look at that. There I see, null. This means that no user is signed in. So this is another great thing. The moment that this listener mounts, it will check the authentication state automatically when you initialize the listener. So the moment you initialize the listener, you will run this callback once. Any future runs of this callback is going to be tied directly to the actual auth state changing. So again, how does the auth state change? Well, we can log in with our user. If I log in with my user here, I should see this auth state trigger. And in order to prove it to you, I'm going to remove the places that may cause it actually to console log. So here what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get rid of this set current user in sign in with Google. Because essentially what I'm going to show you is a pattern that allows us to do this more easily. So I'm going to save this. So right now, sign in, all it does is it calls our authentication method, sign in with email and password. So here, watch what happens. I click sign in. Notice that my context and my callback got called from my listener. The reason for this, of course, is because the listener is listening. The moment we successfully signed in, the listener is like, oh, I registered that a different user has signed in now. My auth state has changed. Therefore, I'm going to run our callback, which is just console logging this user instance. And now we have a centralized place for all of these changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to modify all of our code in order to now just allow this one place to keep track of these references. So join me in the next video where we will centralize this concept.